hospice nurse and a wonderful person that lives in Vermont. And we're excited to hear some stories about how she first had her interactions with the other side and how that plays out in her role as a hospice nurse. So thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's
Um,
exciting.
when did you first, I mean, what even made you want to be a hospice nurse? Did you have a natural inclination to want to be close to the other side or
I
people
mean,
that
it's
were
a hard
sick?
gig. It's
Yeah.
a real tough thing.
I didn't, but I started out as a registered nurse in critical care right out of college, which was pretty rare because it's pretty intense to be a new nurse graduate going right into a critical care situation. And it was a teaching hospital, so I was very fortunate. They were taking new graduates. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I think there were 12 of us who started, and only 3 of us at the end. you know, Nervous breakdowns, emotional breakdowns. It's just really intense. But I learned so much. And one of the things that I learned and that I found was that I was dealing with a lot of death. Critical care is life support. It is end of life care. One type of end of life care that we offer here. So a lot of times, with death comes great intensity, emotions, you know, unresolved emotions. You would have people on life support and family have to decide whether they're going to disconnect. Do they keep going? Just really intense, life-changing conversations are happening at the
Hmm.
bedside.
Mhm.
And I just have to
And
say, Courtney, I can't imagine that job because I don't know if you know this about my background, but my little boy passed away when he was only 3 in an emergency room. And so our family's been through one of these intense end of life experiences. And I can't imagine signing up to do that job over and over.
Yeah,
Just having to go
the
through it once. I know I'm
compassion.
the mom, so it's different for me, but to have to even be in the care role of some like a support role, that's so intense. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do
well,
it.
Yeah,
first of all, I have to say I have done hospice for children. It's very rare and I do not remember it. That is, I did not do pediatric nursing for a reason because it
Mhm.
would make me just want to run home to my kids. And I was like, I
Mhm.
can't emotionally, I couldn't do it. Um, so kids is a whole other level of grief. And I mean, that's just, wow. My heart goes out to you because I can't imagine. Um, and it's funny because in all the years I've been doing it for, I think 12, 13 years now. There's part of it that gets to be normal, but then it never is normal.
Mhm.
Even seeing a person who's passed away, I've sort of gotten used to that physical aspect. It's very shocking. If and these are all my personal beliefs. I believe there's a reason it's shocking to us. You don't want to get used to seeing death too much. You know what I'm saying? In a way, it's shocking to our system. And it's still shocking to me all these years after doing it. And I've done it a lot and I've pronounced countless people and I've been at countless deaths. So it's always a profound experience every time. Um, just some of the things that it just brings up for the human condition. It's like birth. It's life changing.
Yeah.
Anyways, so I want to talk about one experience I had because this has grown and I don't know what it is. um, um, so back to critical care, doing that, having these conversations, intense conversations, um, feeling some moral responsibility for being able to have these conversations in a setting as that's respectful. And instead of I'm trying to hang, 50 IV bags and keep this person's body alive while trying to comfort their family. And,
hmm
it just got to be a lot. So I knew that I wanted to explore this death thing more. I had this experience one day where we got a guy he had a cardiac arrest and they brought him back cardiac wise, but his brain was, he was seizing, he wasn't viable. So he was my patient and I went into the room to hang some IV bags or do something. And I walked in and the whole family is around the bed doing the Lord's Prayer. And I am not religious in any way. I respect all beliefs, all religions, but I have no affiliation with anything. You know, I consider myself spiritual, but I'm not religious. Um, anyways, they're doing this prayer, and I sort of, it was one of those situations where you don't want to walk out and disturb, but you don't want to keep doing what you're doing and disturb. So I just sort of tucked myself over in the corner, and all of a sudden, I don't know how to explain it. And I still don't know how to explain it. I got the goosebumps from head to toe. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I mean, total euphoria. Like, and I'm standing there like, am I going to pass out? What is happening here? This came out of nowhere. I'm just standing in the corner while they're doing the Lord's Prayer over this guy who's going to pass away, you know, another day at work. So I was like, wow, what is that? And then just sort of forgot about it over time. And then fast forward, I started doing more hospice years later. And I'm at another death. And this time the lady, you get pretty good where you can tell, you know, the famous question is always, how much longer does my family member have? And I don't have a crystal ball. I shy away from telling people because I don't know. There are times when, you know, but there are some physical signs that will show us when somebody is dying. There's a process, just like birth is a process, death is a process. So you will have signs when someone is what we call imminent, you know, within hours to 24 to 48 hours, I can predict pretty good there, just because of what the body's doing. And I've been doing it for quite a bit of time that I can even predict at the moment. Like if I'm at somebody's death and I know they're going to pass within minutes, you know, I can tell that. I know, just, I don't know how to explain it. You can just tell by looking.
Just get a sixth sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And there are physiological changes. The color changes, the breathing pattern changes, the neurological changes. Like there are a lot of physical changes that let us know too. It's not a
timing,
but there is another sense, I think, that can kick in. And so I've gotten fairly good at that. And the next experience that I had with this body thing was at a woman's death. And I knew she was passing right at that moment. I just could tell by the things that she was doing, and that little sixth sense kicked in. And the family was around the bed, and you know, I let them all know, because some of them are out of the room and some of them are in the other room. And I sort of, you know, just said, I think she's passing now. And so they all gather at the bedside. They all come in from the room, and they just started telling her how much they loved her, and were hugging on her and kissing on her, and we love you, we love you. And it was just a really charged emotional moment. You know, it's just such a profound time. Anyways, I got that feeling again, that euphoria came over me completely. And that was the second time it happened. And it was many, many years apart, to the point where I had pretty much forgotten about the ICU experience. And I was like, oh my gosh, there it is again. There's that feeling. And I guess it's just love. I don't know what it is. And so I had that feeling a couple other times at a person's death, when they're just passing, like right at that moment. And, you know, she took 2 more breaths and she was gone. So it was like right at that moment, not 24 hours before. You know, it was just at that moment they're taking their last breath. So I had it a couple of other times, and then didn't have it at all. And, you know, sort of noticed like, oh, this is back, or this came again. And about a year or so ago, I noticed that it comes all the time now. It comes when I even just think about someone's death. I'll read something. So it's kind of, you know, I don't know if it's I don't know what it is. And it's probably just my own mind, you know, connecting with that. But it feels very euphoric. It feels like love. It feels like I'm getting a hug from a spirit.
Right.
And it used to be, even before it sort of got to where it is now. It would happen when I would think about my other loved ones who passed away. Now it can happen for anybody. And I think it's, you know, it's a highly emotional charged state. I think it's a feeling of love, you know, and I think we can feel it a lot of times. I think I'm just open to feeling it with spirits. Because, and I think a lot of that has to do with the work that I do.
I think we should pick apart that euphoric experience a little bit.
Yeah.
Because that is like gateway entry into connecting with spirits.
Yeah, I mean, now I got the goosebumps. As soon as you said that, I was like, oh, here
Yeah.
it is. They're there. There
So-
it is. I don't know what it is, honestly.
So like that is the feeling that you get. Oftentimes people will express love and support and connection and communication, and it can be quite overwhelming to experience that for the first time. You mentioned that you had experiences, or you've always felt kind of like you could connect with your own loved ones, and I feel like that's not crazy, like that's not uncommon, because we're more familiar with them. We know what they feel like. We know what that love feels like. It's within reach. But I find it interesting that as you were like opening up the sensitivity of this, what you were first experiencing that connection with, which I would say probably what you're experiencing is the parting of the veil. Like this is when people move through that, right? They move through from they have disconnected from their physical experience. Those cords that connect them to their body have been cut, and they then move through the veil into the spirit world, a spirit life, which has a lot of energy, right? It's got a lot of presence. It's like heaven, the doors to heaven open for a second, and we're like, angels sing. But I find it interesting that the moments that opened you to that were also moments of other people expressing love. It wasn't the quiet bedside people passing alone. It was because it was echoed by the family members in the room. Like they were doing very sacred, appreciative kind of moments with this person, the last moments they had on this earth. So it really is, I think love is the focal point for all of this.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I think so too.
Yeah, I remember, so because we talked about my son's passing, that was more of a traumatic, unexpected event. And then less than a year later, my grandpa died in the hospital, surrounded by family members, expressing love, holding his hand, singing songs. And that's not to say that there wasn't any like sacred element of my son's passing. I definitely felt presence in the room with me, like from the other side. And I felt him staying with me. But because it wasn't like a trauma situation, and it was expected, there was more of a settled, peaceful feeling. And the fact that people,
Acceptance.
yeah, and the people could share their feelings for my grandpa, and it was very beautiful. And it's very moving. And I know that people did express that they felt presence is in the room with, you know, with the family.
Right.
And there were others from the other side, family members from the other side that were there with us.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's profound. You know, I every time it raises so many questions and just so many more, like just so much more profoundness. But one of the things I wanted to know was, is it an old wives' tale that other spirits come back for us? Because a lot of times when I worked in the ICU and places, one of the big things was we don't want mom or dad to die alone. You know, that was one of there are a lot of other concerns now.
Fears.
But yeah, I remember that being a fear. And so, you know, I can very confidently say nobody dies alone. We all die in our own way. There is a universal process that happens that I would say is just like birth. There's a universal process with birth, but we all experience it differently. Same with death. Sometimes people experience, you know, just certain things to certain intensities. So anyways, I wanted to see if it was an old wives' tale, and sort of, I was working the night shift. A lot of people pass away at night because of the circadian rhythms. There is some science to it. Also, people believe because you're already in a deep sleep, it helps you release more, which we do know the body naturally sedates itself throughout the process. And in the end, the body will sedate itself. And sometimes we need to use pharmaceuticals to sedate. just to help that release. So when you are sleeping, you do have that sense of release. And I think that contributes to why a lot of people pass at night. And so anyways, I decided to do my own little research project when I would do, because I was doing a lot of death pronouncements because I was on the night shift. So I would go to people's homes, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, whatever time it is, and do the pronouncement. And that's where we go in, we pronounce them dead. We have to, do things. We do postmortem care. We get them ready for the funeral home. We offer our support to the families, bereavement. We have bereavement folks who are, that's their specialty. They take over, but the nurse sort of makes that first initial contact. We want to know, how was the death experience for people? It helps us to learn, as well as just comforting people. They want to talk about it. It's a real profound thing that they just witnessed emotionally. It's a heavy thing. So you just give people that space and, feel the situation out. Anyways, I would, if it was appropriate, I would ask, did they talk about seeing loved ones who've passed? Or, you just get into casual conversation with people. It's a great time to really have those conversations that you wouldn't normally have because it's such a charged, it's like a portal opens up, and you've got like free reign to ask these things that
people in a state of shock.
Yeah.
And vulnerability.
It's very
really
vulnerable.
So people started telling me, oh yeah, so and so was at the end of the bed. Even children who've been deceased, mom lost a daughter, a baby, when the baby was young, they were there. I mean, they'll just name everybody. Pets, we had one guy who rescued a lot of pets, and he was in, you go through this, there's a time for people when the veil thins for them. And that's why they're able to see these things that we're not able to see. And that's really what it is. And he, he's petting his dog who's not there, so on and so forth. But so people would tell me, oh yeah, everybody's around the bed. And I had one girl, it was her and I and her father. And he was at that place where he was starting to transition. The veil was thinning, but he was still somewhat, he could converse pretty well. So he could tell us a lot. And he, we're standing there and it's me and her and him, and I'm asking her questions. We're just doing our thing. And he's like, oh, where's your team? And, he's like, my team's here, you guys. Where's your team? And we're like, who? And he's like, oh yeah, I got, your Uncle Bob. He says to his daughter, your Uncle Bob's here, your, Grandpa Joe, whoever. He names 4 people in the room. And the daughter and I just look at each other and we're like, yeah, it's just the 3 of us. And she goes, all those people are gone. And so he, he was probably the most alert person that I've ever seen have that experience, because he could have a clear conversation. Usually people, when they're at that stage, they're in and out of consciousness. They're hallucinating. Yeah, they're really, but you can tell by the things that they're doing, which millions of stories of that. And so, the daughter was like, well, Dad, my team's not here yet. It's not my time. Like, we rolled with it. We just sort of went with it and had a pretty frank discussion. And that was impressionable, because he was, I remember thinking, wow, this guy is pretty lucid for him to be seeing that already. But come to find out, people can see it for up to weeks or months before. I'm just used to seeing it a lot more right at the end. You see people will be reaching up towards the ceiling, putting their hands out. When I first started doing hospice, and I was doing hospice and critical care at the same time.
That's
another
intense.
funny story with that is I switched over doing hospice full-time and critical care per diem, and started to really learn death and what it looked like, and seeing people who passed away in their home versus a hospital, whole different experience.
Right.
Anyways, I go for a shift in critical care. I get there an hour into the shift. I see this guy reaching up towards the corner of the ceiling with his arms out. And I said, oh, I know what this means. And sure enough, an hour later, he passed away. And
Yeah.
I'm, calling the resident doctor, doing my thing. But yeah, lots of that. I've been at deaths where it's been really hard and people are fighting the death. I've seen people actually push away,
Hmm.
not wanting to, not putting their arms out, not accepting it.
Mhm.
I think, it's important to note that not everybody has a peaceful death or wants to go.
Pass.
Um,
Yeah.
and so there are really a lot of those experiences too. And those are the hard ones. Those are the ones that make the job that it's hard, you know.
Yeah.
It's people who are doing what we call lingering, where they're just at that state where they're kind of going back and forth. They
Hmm.
look like they're going to pass and then they kind of come to and then they go back,
Right.
so they kind of do a back and forth for a lot of reasons. Most of the time it's they don't want to leave their family. They're not ready to go, for whatever reason. They're waiting for birthdays, for anniversaries, they don't want to
Family members
cause,
to be there.
yeah,
Hmm.
Often I've heard a lot of experiences with people where it's like they were waiting for permission. They were
yes,
waiting for someone to say,
yes.
it's time to go. Like you
I was
are
just going
okay
to
to
tell you
leave.
story.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, because I had many experiences like that. I had that with a guy once. His mother was elderly. He was an only son. She was in a skilled nursing facility. She was ready to go, but she was worried about him clearly, or whatnot. But she did the lingering thing, and I said to him, I said, maybe you just want to go over and just tell her you're going to be okay, whatnot. And this was early on. Now we give that advice to everyone. Now it's just a free flowing advice. But I said it to him, and he went over and he must have done it, whatnot. But he called me and so I left. I did my thing and I left. And he called me a couple days later on my phone, and he said, I just want to thank you for that, because I did go over and I told her, and she ended up passing like within hours. But it made a difference not only for her, I think, but it also made a difference for him.
Hmm.
Yeah.
The
Closure.
closure. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think as a parent, it's like the greatest gift you can give. If my kids came to me and said, "Mom, don't worry, we're going to be okay. If something happens to you," I would be like, that's all I need to hear.
Yes.
That's total freedom.
Yeah.
Um,
Courtney, I want to go
so
back to you talked about the guy saying my team is here. I thought that was really remarkable that he just used the word team. I mean, it is like common vernacular talking about the other side to say my spirit team, but like
Right.
I think it's
In
really
our
cool.
circle, not
Yeah.
in like mainstream
No, no,
circle.
not at
So
all.
it's pocketed language, which is why it's interesting he brought that up.
Well, it's interesting too because I've done sessions with people where and I feel like I've kind of learned a lot about the process of dying as I've been in sessions connecting to people's loved ones and they are talking about their passing. Um, it's like I'm being educated as I go, and I've kind of explained it to people when you pass away, there's always someone who takes you to the other side or escorts you to come to comfort you, but it doesn't always mean there's just one person. Sometimes there's a
Hmm.
few people, like three or four, like because they'll share with me like, oh, and then my mom was there and my brother was there, and they'll share these people. Um, and I think it's so cool that he said my team because like that sentiment of like I'm not alone. I've got people around me. I'm rallied up. That's just such a beautiful like description of it. I love that.
And it's like a
yeah,
happy thing. Like
yeah,
in my experience, it's always been, it's like a point of pride. It's like a badge of honor. I was the person who was there to bring them through to the other side. Like
Hmm.
it was dad, it was mom, it was uncle, it was son. And it's something that the spirits on the other side too, they get excited about. They're pleased. They're joyful to have that kind of reunion. It's not it's not usually a sad thing, especially in those circumstances when it's time, right? When there's peace and release on either side. It's like it's a joyful movement. It's a progression. It's not an end or like a moving backwards for sure.
Yeah. I've
yeah,
also
yeah.
I've also had in session people say, that when they passed away, their spirit didn't want to like go to the spirit world right away. They wanted to linger and be around their family, kind of like how families take their time around the body to just say their goodbyes and like have their moments. The spirits will do the same thing, you know? I thought that was really interesting because I know we for sure did that with my son. We spent a few hours at the hospital, and our younger kids came to say goodbye and stuff after he had passed. And it was really cool to feel that sentiment of the spirits wanting that same experience.
Reflected.
Yeah, I thought that was really special.
It's interesting also the things that stop people from wanting to pass over. You know, we've had people who aren't ready to go because their finances aren't in order. Someone else may look at that and think, oh, that's the least of my concerns.
It's a
You know,
great time to leave just now before the rest gets cleared out.
you know, it's just
Jump out point.
yeah, there's just a lot that happens, and a lot of the physiological things that happen.
And the willpower of the human soul. I mean, how amazing is that, that someone can put it off intentionally as the physical body is beginning to shut down because they're not ready for it. They don't
Oh
want it
yeah.
yet. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
I've
amazing.
experienced that in session. Like you know, sometimes you want to just tell people, like there's a human natural inclination to want to tell people what they want to hear, but that's not ethical. And so sometimes it's like, well, you probably already sensed this, but your mom really didn't want to pass. She was digging in her heels. Oh yeah, that's my mom.
Yeah.
She's at
Yeah,
peace
I
with
mean,
it
people,
now, but she was not happy in the moment. She did not want to like let her life slip away. She was not into it.
yeah, it's a funny thing too, because you see how when the deaths of our elderly are very different from the deaths of our young cervical cancer, breast cancer people, even our middle-aged folks. You know, it's just by the time you're 80, 90 years old, you're ready. I've had elderly people say to me, I wish I wouldn't have eaten so healthy when I was young. I'm ready to go, and I'm still going. You know,
That'll be my husband.
they are ready to go. And all their friends and family have already gone. I mean,
Hmm.
at that point, they have more loved ones on the other side
Right.
than they have here. So you know, they're feeling lonely
Yeah,
here on
that's
Earth.
very lonely.
And those deaths are generally the most peaceful ones.
I think there is a lot of interaction that we can't see because just like when Ella and I connect to the other side, it's telepathic or it's feelings or thoughts or, you know,
Yeah, it's
images.
internal.
It's internal. And so I've had experiences where someone has kind of relayed to me their passing experience and they're having conversations with mom on the other side telepathically that nobody can visibly see. I mean, they're in a coma, so there's not any like eye movement or mouth movement. It's just they can't tell
Sometimes there
anything.
is though. Sometimes there
And
is though.
sometimes there is too, but like
Uh,
it's just so fascinating. Like you said, no death is the same. It's kind of like every birth story is unique. That's why when you have a baby, your friends will be like, "Well, tell me about it." And well, the baby came out, and I'm like, I want to
Or
hear
maybe don't
everything.
tell about it. Sometimes they're traumatizing. I think that's a good time to mention too that there's a flip side of the coin where sometimes the body won't fail, but the mind already has. Um, my grandfather was this way. He suffered from Parkinson's and he had lost my grandmother 2.5 years prior to Alzheimer's. And he was just ready. He was the moment she died, he was like, take me too. And he had to go the rest of that time waiting, waiting, and the body just also wasn't ready. So there's an interesting flip side to that coin in experience of passing as well.
So when my son passed away, he was pronounced dead at the hospital. Um, but my husband and I both kind of had this spiritual knowing or spiritual impression that his spirit passed from his body. He had stopped breathing. He died from choking. He had stopped breathing fully in the arms of a police officer as the ambulance was coming down the street to like resuscitate. And he had only stopped breathing, you know, for a second, but we had an impression later that's when his spirit had left his body. We talked about it the day he died. We're like, I don't think he was actually, maybe his body was having some response. Like, I don't want to use this, sounds like the most flippant analogy, but like a chicken after its head's been cut off, there's still like a
mhm.
response. Um, because
It's a
he also, yeah,
mechanical
because
response to the
I
body.
know you don't, I know your body doesn't stop breathe. I mean, doesn't die right after you stop breathing, you know, and that's not, you can go like 8, 7 minutes or whatever without breath. But on paper, he only went a minute and a half without, because then they were able to resuscitate him to an extent. So he shouldn't have passed away on paper anyway. Like there's no like actual like scientific reason why my son shouldn't be here. We felt like it was supposed to be his time. My husband had had some premonitions before he passed away, which is super interesting. But like, so then we also, the police officer that was like kind of holding him while, just to keep him stable while the first responders were coming, the other first responders, we told him, we said, just had this feeling like he passed away in your arms. And he said, I had the exact same feeling. Like the moment, like he stopped breathing, I just had that spiritual knowing.
I had one child death. It was a beautiful death. It was at home. That's one of the reasons that I really left the hospital ICU situation and came to home, because I believe, just like, and this is my own personal beliefs, I believe just like your environment for birth matters, your environment for death matters, your environment for everything matters. And it's a different experience when you're at home than when you're in the hospital. It just is.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that one is better than the other. You can have I've had beautiful deaths in the hospital, peaceful deaths. I mean, and I've also seen some of the most tragic deaths. So, you know, it's just a matter, again, it's all a matter of preference. But I find in the home is where I prefer to attend.
Mm-hmm. It's a sacred space.
Yeah, it really is.
Well, there's less stimulus, there's less going on, there's less distraction. It feels more private and intimate than maybe any hospital ever could.
When I first started, people were like, oh, aren't you afraid to see a dead person and all this and that? And I thought, you know, for as big of a mystery as it is for us, it's going to happen to all of us.
Right.
Yeah.
It's kind of ironic.
Like, should it be this big mystery? I don't know. You know, is it a big mystery? I don't know that either.
Compartmentalization. You have to separate out the work process from like the mortal experience, the human experience of what something is that you're experiencing.
Yeah,
So
that was tricky with my mom's death, with my parents dying, you know, because I was like, gosh, am I a hospice nurse or am I a daughter? Like, I sort of had to do both.
Which hat? Both hats.
So my question for you is, you're feeling the veil thin, you feel like you're having communications with your son. Does that make the grief easier? And if so, I wonder if we as a collective, as a humanity, will we ever get to the point where the veil is so thin that when somebody passes, we don't feel grief. We feel joy. We feel like they're still with us. We feel like, oh, you know, mom's just in the other room. Will that sense of grief ever leave our human spirit if the veil thins?
I think that, so my background is also in grief coaching. So I've been a life coach for 17 years. And then after my son passed, I started to go into more grief coaching. So I love grief is something I geek out on. I study, I do for work.
I need to pick your brain.
Yeah.
Geek
So
out for
I
grief.
think that all of these amazing experiences does help. It's like a buoy, kind of keeps my head above water, but it doesn't like take away that human aspect of heavy, deep grief. It certainly helps. And when I do sessions with people as a grief coach, I can just do like traditional grief coaching. But if I'm going to put myself into the story and my own experiences, I can't say that I grieved. Like I didn't grieve without connecting to my son. That is part of my story. That's what made it easier for me, is trying to just, you know, crack open the veil a little bit and just feel him and, you know, accept that he's still with me and have these experiences. So, I only know it that way personally, but those amazing experiences don't take away the grief. It helps for sure, but I'm still human and I still have to go through the throes of humanity, and those waves of grief still hit me. But I think it's a buffer. I really do. So, or the buoy analogy again, it keeps my head above water. I'm still going under, but it pops me back up faster. Maybe.
Gives you hope.
It gives me hope. And I do think though that if people continue to have these experiences and we normalize having experiences through the veil with our loved ones, then we can not feel so isolated. So we started this podcast so people would not feel isolated in their gifts. So if I can talk about it with my friend and it's not weird for her, and I can just talk about it with my family that, you know, Wesley's still around, that supports me so I'm not isolated in my grief. So that could make a
Because that's
shift for all
damning.
of humanity. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that grief is one of those things that you have to process naturally in order to heal. And there will always be, I mean, this is the ideal. What a wonderful world it would be if we were just like in full communication and connection with spirit. But I think that that's not really the point of why we're here. And so there has to be something of a separation.
Mhm.
And so we're not meant to have, so most of the time when you're interacting with these spiritual gifts, even people who have put a lot of work, a lot of development, who are very gifted into it. It's not quite the same as having someone sitting next to you having a conversation, really, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're getting communication, you have that connection, you can see them, you can feel them, but their physical presence is still not there. And as human beings who are physical, we crave that. We crave the touch, we crave the actual
Right there.
appearance of the person, right? And so having that space be there, I think will always leave an opening for grieving
Mhm.
because they're not here with you. So, I
Yeah.
mean, we grieve it, we grieve it when friends move away and they
Right.
haven't gone anywhere. They're
Yeah, that's
just
true.
not
There's so many
here,
different
right?
forms of grief. It's not just loss of
Right.
a person.
Yeah.
A
Yeah.
person. But that is a form of loss too, because that physical presence is no longer there.
Mhm.
And so it would take an exceptionally elevated place of thinking to, I think, circumnavigate that completely.
And
And I don't know that
consistency.
humanity will get, yeah,
Yeah.
consistently. I don't know we'll ever
And
get there.
maybe we
But
don't want to get to that point where there isn't the veil, there isn't
right,
a separation. It
because
would,
we're supposed to be
we're supposed
physical.
to,
We're supposed
yeah,
to be
yeah,
here.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
I tell clients that grief will remain until that real reunification occurs, whether it be by you passing over as well to join them on the other side, or in the Christian world, we talk about like the end of the world and then this reunification of everyone together.
Yeah.
This worldly experience passing away. Either way, like that's when I think the grief will completely just go away because we're actually together. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
as a collective, as the whole spirit. Yeah, yeah,
yeah. Thank you so much for coming today and sharing your stories with us. It's fascinating. And we've wanted a hospice nurse to come on for a while.
Yeah.
Um, we had a hospice social worker who shared a couple things, but that was like an internship situation. We've been wanting a hospice nurse to come on and share like the breadth of experiences that you've had. So thank you so much for coming on today.
And
yeah,
thank you for the work
definitely.
that you're doing. I mean, what a valuable gift to have that kind of compassion for people, especially at such a difficult time. And to bear the grief and the burden with someone in that moment it is singular. I don't
Mhm.
know that many people have that capacity just so naturally. So thank you for the work that you do as well.
Well, I'll tell you, it's an honor. I thank people for letting me come in to their home and experience it with them, because it's a very personable thing, and just it's pretty emotional charged moment. So to be able to share in that with people is a gift.
If you guys want to keep in touch with us, we have a website. It's throughtheveilpodcast.com.
We also have our Facebook page that you can jump on and join and see what's going on with us. We have a monthly meetup every month on the last Thursday of every month for anybody who's interested in any kind of intuitive development or exploration of gifts or has questions that they would love us to answer. If you have questions that would like to be featured on the podcast, reach out to us through the email, through the website, through the Facebook, through the comments below, anything. And we love feedback. Also, I do have one more spirit communication intensive course coming up as one final round this year before I have a baby. That's starting in August. So if you have any interest in that, feel free for reaching out, and or if you would like to book a session with either Camille or I, feel free to reach out as well. We will see you next time.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.